Hello, good evening. My name's Ian King from the British Computer Society South Wales branch. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce Helen Northmore and Eugene to talk about the digital health ecosystem in Wales. I think this has been the impact of the COVID pandemic has had some interesting impacts on IT and how we make healthcare available, and has opened up a lot more channels to healthcare than maybe we imagined previously. And so it's as I understand, Helen and what Helen and Eugene do, they're in a group which tries to make that data more available and advise and guide people on how to do it and how to provide, services, the sort of services we'd like to see in the 21st century. So I think there's only a small group of us here so far. So if Helen just starts slowly, that might give people latecomers a chance to make their final cup of tea and join us. But welcome. Thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you for the invitation to come and talk about what we do. And I think you really summed up what's happened over the last 9 to 12 months, which has been, the response to a global pandemic and how it's really impacted how we deliver healthcare in Wales. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about, I'm going to talk about the programme, why we exist. I'm going to talk about some of the less technical things that we do, which will just sort of set a context about what digital health care is like in Wales and the kinds of things that are happening. And then I'm going to hand over to Eugene, who's going to go through the more technical work stream that we have, which is probably a bit more of interest to this audience. And there'll be plenty of time at the end for lots of conversations and chat. So, do feel free to contribute as we're going through, and we'll pick it up at the end. So, Eugene's driving the slides for me, so if you'd like to flip over, please. So the Digital Health Ecosystem Wales is a partnership between two organisations. So I work for the Life Sciences Hub. Our sort of responsibility, we're funded by the Welsh Government, it's to accelerate innovation and the adoption of new things in health and care in Wales. And Eugene works for the NHS Wales Informatics Service, or NWIS, which is about to become Digital Health and Care Wales. And NWIS provides the national digital architecture for healthcare in Wales. So all of the big national systems and all the systems that talk to each other, NWIS are responsible for. And it's a unique partnership. There are other organisations that are like us in Scotland, in England and in Northern Ireland, but nowhere else is that partnership between the innovation, adoption, acceleration piece and the actual deliverers of the digital architecture. So we're unique, and we're really, we've been working together now for about 3.5 years as partners, and we really sort of have gained a lot of strength on each other's side from what we do. Next slide, please. Oh, I felt like Chris Whitty. So what is an ecosystem and why do we need one? So an ecosystem is a fancy word for a network. The idea of the network started about 3.5 years ago, and actually it is our 3rd anniversary next week, which is quite exciting. And next slide. So when I started, I've been in post, I started just as we were launched, and we went out and talked to lots of SMEs, big companies, frontline clinicians, informatics people, to try and understand why digital innovation wasn't happening. I mean, we are so used to managing our entire life on our phone, and we walk into a hospital and we go back 10 years and it's all paper records, and it's sort of I get 21 letters a year from the health service minimum to book appointments. Why are we not doing this online? So this is why it was felt there needed to be an ecosystem, and these are some of the barriers that the people we talked to said that was stopping them from being able to adopt new technologies. Now, none of this should be rocket science to anybody who works in health. So for example, in partnership models, the health service is very used to buying hospitals and gloves, but not necessarily these new type of systems and licenses and there's concerns about big IT infrastructure purchases. You know, and there is a culture, and I actually think this is probably, because this slide is from pre-COVID, I think there's been a bit of a change. There is a digital, much more of a digital innovation culture now, because if anything, the last 12 months has told us that we cannot deliver healthcare in the same old ways that we have done. Outpatients clinics haven't particularly changed in the last 40 to 50 years. They have changed more in the last 9 months than they have in 50 years. So there is a more acceptance and understanding of the need for a digital innovation culture. Actually measuring and data on how new technology has an impact is quite hard. Infrastructure is a particular blocker because we're piecing together 40 or 50 years of legacy systems in languages that aren't necessarily used. There's lots of apocryphal stories where, you know, multi-million-pound scanners are using Windows XP and you can't upgrade them because then the scanner becomes junk. We're still in that situation and working through how that's going to work. Conversations are slow because, you know, the NHS is a big super tanker. It's not an agile speedboat. And we've got to make sure that everything is, you know, in process, it's sort of supported and doing the right thing. Patient safety is a huge driver. So, you know, and everyone feels unsupported. We thought it was going to be, you know, the SMEs feel that it's difficult to sell their product, but then clinicians are expected to be innovators on top of their day job when their day job is, you know, full-time already. And so there's just a whole bunch of barriers. So next slide, please. So after talking to lots of people and trying to understand what the challenges were, we said, what can we do as a small group of people in a very big system? So we developed sort of 4 principles or criteria that said, this is where we're going to do things. So that driving focus of making it easier and faster. One of our main activities is being a connector, an enabler, a facilitator, helping conversations happen quicker with the right people. So does it use our ability, does what we're proposing to do use our ability to convene and connect? Does it fill a gap where things are not happening right now or things are too difficult? And it means that we focus on things that are very practical, quite short term. How can we make things 1% better? There's no point trying to boil the sea or eat the elephant. We've got to try and make each step a little bit easier, and we'll get there towards the end. Next slide, please. So we have 3 work streams, and I'm going to talk about connecting people and connecting delivery. And I'll hand over to Eugene, and he's going to talk about connecting systems. And we think that if we do those 3 things, we will make it easier and faster to adopt digital healthcare technology. But sometimes it does feel like you're pushing a very big rock up a hill, but we'll get there. Next slide. Yeah. So this is some of what we do. How do we connect people? So we hold events. We had an event earlier this week on open air, which is a way of managing data which is vendor neutral, using standards to ensure standards and interoperability, because quite often in healthcare you'll see big vendor specific programs that will promise you the earth, but they do lock you in. So how can we make sure that actually we have a system that is pieced together that doesn't have those artificial barriers? We've done events around what is an API and why should I know about it for a non technical audience. We've brought together all the ecosystems and networks across the UK and Ireland. We've done events about the importance of evaluation. And so we've done events that are very technical, or ones where we've tried to raise awareness with a less technical audience, and trying to create conversations about sort of important topics, raise the knowledge level, and create a community interested in digital health in Wales. And we can see that. So because it's our birthday, we've been looking up some stats. And 2.5 years ago, we didn't have a Twitter presence. Now we have 1,155 people following us on Twitter, and we have over 1,000 people have opted into our newsletter. So they're keen to find out what we're doing. And what we do with Twitter and the newsletter is highlight new reports, funding competitions, opportunities, and the sort of events and things that are happening that we want people to be aware of what's happening around digital health. We provide event support to a range of other national programs and organisations to try and reach outside of their traditional audience. So NDR stands for National Data Resource, which is a flagship data project which is happening. to try and piece together all of the data that we have within the NHS, because we have lots and lots and lots of data. We have very little ability to access that data or analyse that data. So there's a big project to try and improve that. And that would have traditionally talked primarily to an NHS audience. So our role is to say, well, hey, there's industry and the voluntary sector and all these other people that you need that can give you insight and expertise and understanding, and also will need to interact with what you're doing. We're a member of something called the European Connected Health Alliance, which is a network of networks, and actually it's much wider than Europe. I think there's now digital health ecosystems in around sort of 50 countries and regions, and we're part of that network. And as part of that, we've been able to take people to go and visit other systems and sort of understand what's happening. So in Scotland, they're doing a big project similar to the National Data Resource, but they're a bit further ahead. So we went to go and find out what they're doing. And they have the Bayes Centre, which is looking at, in this very impressive building in the University of Edinburgh, host to a Turing Institute and all sorts of things. And in particular, the South Korea event, we didn't get to go to South Korea, unfortunately. But what we did was there were people from South Korea who were coming over to the UK, and we managed to encourage the Department of International Trade and the UK government that they should host one of their events promoting the opportunities in South Korea in Cardiff for Welsh businesses to attend, whereas traditionally that would have been held in London. So it's really just trying to build bridges and links outside of Wales and sort of raise awareness that because sometimes it doesn't feel like there is a world outside of Wales. And that's increasingly important in a post-Brexit environment. Next slide, please. So a lot of what we did in the last 9 months was back in March. We, as the pandemic was kicking off, we were deluged. Well, not we. Clinicians were being deluged with offers of support from industry who were saying, how can we help in this difficult situation? But what was interesting was, as you can see from the numbers, of the 205, most of them were just trying to sell us something, which was a really poor understanding of the needs of the NHS. And I was very surprised. I thought that actually it would be more genuine, how can we help? And quite a lot of it was, how can we sell you our existing product that we've put a COVID badge on? And a lot of people saw it as a business opportunity. And that may have been the case in England, and it's a very different NHS structure and commissioning structure and digital structure in England, and they were buying lots of things in. In Wales, we tend to develop things in-house, and NWIS did a huge amount of work in that sort of 3 to 6 months, building a data hub and all sorts of and the test, trace and protect system. But what was coming out was that remote monitoring was being seen as a really important tool to avoid people having to be in hospital, to be able to release them to home, or to avoid them coming in if they're chronic condition management. And that was so that telehealth, how can you remote monitoring conditions, is a real theme that's come out post-COVID about how things can be done differently. Because traditionally, if you have a chronic condition, you'll have an appointment with your consultant every 3 months, and then they'll take some tests there, and then you'll find you won't see anyone for 3 months, and you don't know how you're doing. And I think that that's a big fundamental change in how we deliver healthcare that's going to really come to the fore in the next sort of in the next 12 months, and then be part of how we deliver healthcare moving forward. Next slide, please. So the other work stream we have is called Connecting Delivery, which is a fancy word for projects. And this is where we step in where we think we can help something innovative happen. So some of the projects around the bottom, we funded a pilot and supported the Royal Glamorgan Hospital to test out RFID technology to track wheelchairs, bladder scanners and items around the hospital, because there was a perception that nurses and porters were spending a lot of time looking for equipment, and actually if you could see where the equipment was, then you would spend less time wandering around, more time able to support patients. And actually part of what we did, and that was not just pay for some technology to go in, it was understanding the challenges in the health boards for actually putting the project together. So a 6-month project took 18 months, and also we provided an independent evaluation of the technology, which threw up lots of things. So there was this assumption that 45 minutes is spent each time by a nurse looking for a wheelchair. And actually what we found out was that it took 45 minutes to find a wheelchair, but the nurse did 10 or 11 other things on the way. So you couldn't say that that 45 minutes was solely looking for wheelchairs. And until you actually go and test the technology, you can't test those assertions. And actually that's really grown. The hospital has taken on the technology and it's being extended across the hospital and actually across the health board. And particularly in a period of COVID, being able to track where pieces of equipment have been and who they've been with has been vital in terms of infection control. We provided support to a company called Chiron Medical, who were bidding for a big pot of AI funding, and they wanted to have a pilot site in Wales. And so what we did was use our connections to create a partnership with Breast Test Wales, who are now testing out leading edge, cutting edge AI technology on screening, so that patients in Wales will get the benefit of trying that out earlier. We've also spent about almost a year now supporting a sister program called Technology Enabled Care. They're the people who've rolled out video consulting across the NHS in 12 months. So they rolled out to every GP practice in Wales in 7 weeks, covered secondary care for the rest of 2020, which is outpatients and mental health services, therapies, all sorts of things rolled out, and it's now being rolled out to dentists, optometrists and pharmacists. And so we said, how can we help? And so we've been leading on their communications with those audiences for the past 9 months, because they just needed somebody to come in and help, and they didn't have time to go and find people. And we do lots of comms, so it made sense. We provide lots of support to organisations and panels and groups that we think are having important conversations. So something called the Advanced Analytics Group and the Welsh Technical Standards Board. And so we provide that sort of secretariat, making the meetings happen, hosting them and chasing everybody on what they said they would do. And Network Data Labs and AI in Health and Care, we've done a lot of work supporting organisations bidding for UK funding pots. Wales traditionally does very poorly in these sort of funding competitions. Part of that is that in England, because you have an internal market, the trusts are all used to bidding for funding and actually have teams of people who that is their job. Because of the way that the health system is structured in Wales, we don't need to do that, so that we haven't got the expertise. There are so many incredible people and projects and opportunities in Wales, but we just haven't done a good job in telling these funding competitions that they should invest in us. So we were able to build together a partnership of Public Health Wales, NWIS, Swansea University and Social Care Wales to win some money to build a network data lab, which is looking at big data and linked data, health and social care data, to do some analysis around some big public health questions. And we supported a number of applications into a very big pot of funding called AI in Health and Care Award. And the other main thing we've done this year, the Welsh Government wanted to really jump on the momentum that we've had around this culture shift within the health service, about how do we take new technologies and help us to do new things in new ways, or the same old things but in new ways. And so over the summer the Welsh Government put up £150,000, which we ran a competition to appoint 5 winners in the end. We not new technology, tested technology or implemented technology, market ready technology that wasn't being used in Wales. So we appointed 5 winners. Physio now providing a triage chatbot for, so basically if you're referred by your GP or you self-referring to physio services, it can sort of help triage where you need to go. And that pilot has been on over 1,000 patients in Cwmtaf Morgannwg, which is around the Bridgend area, and Hywel, which is Pembrokeshire and Carmarthenshire, have gone through that. We've supported moving an emotional resilience training course for NHS workers, from being face-to-face to being an online training course, because it was felt that this will be a huge need over the next 12 to next few years. So it's something that could be done. And how do we move such an important course online? And those are completed. And the other 3, 2 of them are remote monitoring. One of them is Medipod is going to be with heart failure patients in North Wales and Cwmtaf Morgannwg. And Clinitouch V we're looking at using with people who've been diagnosed with COVID and checking their oxygenation levels at home, so that we can make sure that we get the right intervention at the right time. And those are hopefully going to kick off in the next month or two. But actually, this was supposed to be a pilot that happened over last summer and was all wrapped up by now. But the challenge that we faced is that there's just been no capacity within the health boards, the real desire to do them, but no capacity to run a project or a pilot or to do anything that requires additional time. And so that's been the big learning for us out of that. Okay, next slide. The other thing we have is a website, so digitalhealth.wales. So we've set it up as the ecosystem, but we are home to a number of national programmes, because we wanted it to be that sort of first stop shop, that signpost, that lots of information and resources. So hopefully you can self-serve what you need, but at the same time find out about programmes that are very linked to each other all in one place. Because you know, previously there's been lots of different organisations, and each of them that's leading on the projects, you know, each of them is, you have to go and hunt for it. We tried to bring things together. So as you can see from this front page, we've got 3 programmes. Care Improvement Cymru, which is coming online. They promise next week, but I think it'll be another couple of weeks. And then there's the Advanced Analytics Group, who've been building a catalogue of data projects that are happening within the NHS. That's coming online very shortly soon. Next page. And I think you'll be glad to know, I think this is my last one. So this is the other part of the website. So this is where we have lots of information and resources. So as you can see, we've put up whether there are opportunities or services that are available, how-to and dummy guides and information for people who perhaps haven't got a technical background. So, you know, and if you clicked on the box that said AI on our website, it'll give you a whole list of resources that can start building your knowledge. We've got the NHS Wales Developer Portal on there, which Eugene is going to talk about in a bit. And we've also got, basically, if you have an idea or you're working on a project and you're hitting a barrier or challenge, we've got resources and links, because there's actually a huge amount of support out there for companies and clinicians who want to develop new health products in Wales. However, it's very hard to find out what those resources are and which ones are right for you at which stage in your development journey. So we're trying to make that a bit easier. So that's a very brief canter through the less technical side of what we do, but the focus is around bringing people together, helping conversations happen, getting over barriers and challenges. How can we make things easier and faster? But when the ecosystem was conceived, that wasn't the driving force. That was almost like an add-on activity. And the driving force on why did we need an ecosystem was an ambition that we would be able to make it easier and faster for developers to develop new digital healthcare technology products by opening, not opening up NHS Wales systems, but opening up a sandbox and ways of testing things, so that you know, it was going to be easier to integrate new products and services into the NHS. So Eugene, I'm going to hand over to now, who's going to take you through the journey of what we've done on that side to try and make it easier on what is a traditionally horrendous process. Eugene.
Eugene, are you muted?
Sorry. Can you all hear me now?
We can hear you now. It's lovely. We'd love to see you as well. If you
my apologies.
There you are.
There we are. Yeah, so I was just quickly saying, obviously the ecosystem's been running for a while. I joined on the 1st of March last year, just before we went into lockdown. It's been a bit of an adventure ever since. But yeah, my name's Eugene O'Sullivan. I'm product specialist with the ecosystem on the NWIS side. So we obviously work closely with Helen and the guys on the Life Sciences Hub and see how we can support them. So for example, with the Digital Solutions Fund, although I haven't mentioned it in my slides, we worked with them to help with that and look at how potentially what an integration might look like for companies looking to integrate with NHS Wales via the DSF fund. But what I was going to talk about first was a bit of background. What we're obviously, one of the key aspects one of the key reasons the team exists is around engagement and how we can look to engage better with third parties, with suppliers, and how we can help them to integrate with NHS Wales systems. And one of the things we've been doing over the last year and a half, 2 years, is testing APIs with industry using open and interoperability standards, FHIR, which I'll mention in a minute, and looking at how we can progress those standards and how they can then positively support NHS Wales and the NDR programme. So a lot of what we've been doing so far is around discovery and R&D, planning for a baseline infrastructure, having a look at API management, which I'll mention a little bit as well, looking at open standards, looking at standards around APIs, and driving forward interoperability for health and care systems. And of course, one of the key things that we want to promote as well is open architecture, opening up the NHS Wales architecture, making more visible so that people can understand how they can integrate, and hopefully improve the speed at which people can integrate with NHS systems going forward. So a quick one around APIs and interoperability. I don't think this slide needs to be here because I'd imagine you all know what an API is, but obviously talking about application programming interfaces, defining that communication contract, how we share information between our services and the client, be that client in the health board or the third-party supplier or within our own organizations, and just talking about web APIs to search and fetch data through HTTP. Now, there's many different types of APIs and flavors. APIs can be written, traditionally there's a lot of enterprise level APIs are written in SOAP, but you also have REST APIs. There's newer styles of APIs coming out as well, the gRPC, HL7 FHIR, GraphQL as well. And we'll hopefully over the future, we'll be over time, we'll be looking at some of these as well and how they could support NHS Wales. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was, say, the existing environment with APIs. A lot of APIs have been developed over years. They've been developed when that was the right flavor, the right type of API at the time. But obviously, some of these can create technical debt. So I mean, when we think about where teams creating RESTful APIs or SOAP APIs, quite often it's difficult to enforce standards. It's hard to create a common language for the data, as each team and each developer exposing APIs will tend to write it in a style that suits them. And this, of course, is the unintended consequences of creating an integration burden on other teams and system suppliers. So we need to kind of move to a common interoperability standard for exposing data in our healthcare setting. And one of the things we've been looking at a lot is FHIR. So FHIR stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. It's an open standard created by HL7. It's a standard for healthcare data exchange. It gives a structure and a framework and common resources in a healthcare setting. It kind of gives that common language for applications to speak to each other. And FHIR solutions are basically built of a set of modular components. They're called resources, and these resources can easily be assembled into working systems that solve real world problems. It takes into account many commonly used resources that we'd expect in a healthcare setting. So, for example, thinking about a patient, a practitioner role, organization, and how we can connect these together to create a holistic view of a care pathway or a patient's medical record, and how we go forward with that. And if we can work in this kind of common language to talk to each other, it benefits integration, improves interoperability standards, makes it easier to integrate with APIs. So we've obviously been looking at some examples of this. For example, organizational reference data, where we think about organizations, practitioners, and practitioner roles, like I've already mentioned. Looking at how we can make a fit for production FHIR API that would quickly integrate with other systems and support the NDR in the wider role of creating, of exposing that data in a consistent manner. And it's really about building up a picture and building up that holistic view of how the resources are connected and how they interact. So for example, looking at it, we'd want to consider an organization of type health board has, a hospital will be part of a health board, but it might have main location or multiple locations. It'll have wards attached to it, and we want to be able to drill down into that information in a consistent and holistic way. And what we're trying to do is create the building blocks to a larger system of data. In that, one of the things that NDR will be looking at is in next year is the Yorkshire and Humber Care Record, which is a system of systems that can pull in data from different resources. And what we want to do is look at helping them create the building blocks that'll be put in place in order to then, if you've got your organizations, your locations, your practitioners, if you've got your code systems and your value sets in place, be that from onto a server or individual value sets and code systems that are held against the FHIR profile, which I'll talk about in a second, then you'll be able to build up a record that builds into the patient record, the encounter, where we want to pull in diagnostic reports or observations. We need this data and this building block that creates that'll create that information, that'll support that information. And FHIR has another function of it called profiles. So profiles allow you to define required fields. They give you a set of rules and extensions that you can build upon. So if you have a basic FHIR profile, you might not necessarily have date of birth or as a required field, or patient surname as a required field, but you might say in Wales there are certain requirements we need, and this allows us to build extensions as well around around those resources in FHIR to be able to pull in, to be able to identify and show information that we need and that we desire in a Welsh context. So what you can, there is the UK core implementation, which is the R4 version of FHIR at the moment, which is a collaboration between HL7, NHS Digital, and NWIS as well. Mark Frayne from the NDR program sits on this, and they're looking at a UK core standard set of profiles that represent all of the UK. But you can build on top of so if you create a set of standards like the UK core set of standards, you can build on top of those standards as well. So you can create a Welsh core set of standards that inherit from the UK core and implement those standards while pulling in more information as in a more bespoke way that's needed in Wales. And one of the ways we're working towards that is through the interoperability working group, which is run through NDR, but the ecosystem is heavily involved and helps out. There's representatives of health boards on there, as well as key stakeholders looking at the standards for NHS Wales and really pushing forward what we need in a way that will then lead to us being able to publish those standards in a production ready manner and get them signed off by the Welsh Technical Standards Board and then be able to use them in a production setting. So as I said, with profiles, it's looking at the agreed interoperability for Wales, agreed national standards for what FHIR resources look like in Wales, and building those on top of UK core. And one of the things we've been doing as well in the ecosystem is when we look at these FHIR APIs and these FHIR standards, we've looked to collaborate with industry as well, get feedback on how these need to be built and how they could feed through international systems. So moving on from APIs, I want to talk about developer access. And one of the things we're very keen to do is to build an API marketplace, to build a platform that helps connect stakeholders within the healthcare industry and improve the efficiency of the entire care process, to be able to bring people through from systems into our national systems. And we started on the journey. A key starting point of that was being open and visible about what we have available, what APIs are there. So at the moment, we've built a catalog of current APIs for developers to understand what's available and what's there in NHS Wales. And that catalog feeds into the developer portal, which is in beta at the moment. We've started developing. We're looking at building a catalog, like I said, of the APIs that are available, looking at sandbox APIs as well. So where possible, we want to put sandbox implementations that are isolated just with dummy data in them, but so that we can create that test harness for developers to come along and understand the requirements against specific APIs, understand how they can connect them against against APIs, in the view of helping them progress an integration if needed, because one of the things is it's obviously there's a lot of governance, there's a lot of there's a lot to think about and a lot of things that need to be checked before you can just access national APIs. So a key thing is that if we can help users understand not just what the APIs look like and what they can expect, the onboarding process as well, I think that's a key driver for the portal, because what we're looking at is, like I said, an API catalog, sandbox APIs, publishing SDKs, publishing standards as well where we can, such as, for example, SNOMED CT standards when they get ratified, and putting assurance requirement standards and whatnot up there, so that we can open up that architecture and open up knowledge of how you can integrate. Like I said, the original intention was to develop open access APIs. We have multiple sandbox APIs already in there. We've got sandbox APIs for reference data, demographic information, no patient identifiable information behind that or anything, but just like I said, a sandbox. Diagnostic observations, SNOMED CT, what you could expect when connecting to SNOMED CT API, the Welsh Care Record Service, which takes in documents that can be saved against the patient's record and viewed across Wales through applications like WCP. And like we've mentioned before, it's a journey that we're trying to go on. If we can build up a picture of how you can integrate and how you can understand integration with NHS Wales, then we can support you in that process of integrating as well. And I guess a question and a feedback point as well is, what APIs are useful, what can we get back as well, and we're always interested to hear feedback. We always want to hear feedback on how we can improve the portal and make it easier to integrate. And on the portal as well, there's work on FHIR, there's sandbox APIs around experimental FHIR APIs that are not necessarily in production yet, they're not available, but it's a proof of concept and work in progress that hopefully will build towards that production API. So the benefits of the portal are a single place for guidance on how to access NHS Wales resources, ease of integration for systems for third-party suppliers to be able to promote consistent standards and to be a go-to place for developers looking to integrate with NHS Wales. To be open and transparent, and it's very much a key driver of the open architecture is being open and transparent about what we have and what people can use, to have that test harness in place, and to reduce the burden on developers up front. They can be pointed at the portal, they can develop proof of concepts and understand their integration requirements. So the next steps for us is around the portal is to get feedback, to continuously improve the portal, to work with the Life Sciences Hub in Wales to further improve industry engagement on the portal as well, to continue building that catalogue of developer focused content, publishing information standards like I've already mentioned as well. And what we'd like to do, I think the longer term view would be that we'd be able to create the NHS Wales developer portal as not just kind of an NWIS or a DHCW developer portal, but an all Wales developer portal, taking into the health boards, taking in social care, taking in the work of NDR as well. And what we're trying to build towards, obviously, is kind of production API management. And one of the reasons I mentioned this is, and why API management is important, is that at the moment we don't have an API management layer in front of APIs nationally. Now, if we can get an API management as a key component in how we present, govern, and protect and authorize the use of our APIs. It touches on so many different aspects of how we can improve that journey for a user, and how we can integrate people quicker, and how we can build consistency in how they can integrate. And like I said, for us, it's been it is a journey. We started off with the catalog, looking at sandbox APIs, and really that journey needs to end in production API management being in place, and a production developer portal and a production gateway in place for people to interconnect. So a quick overview of API management. What is API management? It's basically, there's multiple products out there, and I'll mention a little bit about this in a second, but it's basically, most products are built of three basic components. There's the developer portal, where you can view documentation, API catalog, standards, and access analytics. There's the API gateway, which accepts the API calls. It gives us, routing functionality. It verifies those API keys, using OAuth, OpenID Connect, or JOTS. It enforces policies. It creates it can do transformations, so we could do RESTful to SOAP. You could take a SOAP API and expose it RESTfully, and it can do analytics as well. And of course, there's the admin portal aspect of this as well, where you can define and you can basically put the governance around your APIs. You can define and import APIs. You can create products, so you can group your APIs into different products, and you can administer how they're used, analyze usage, and you can manage the users that are using it as well. And the key benefits it gives us is, that ability to have enhanced authentication of the APIs that are available at the moment. It gives us caching availability as well. So for less volatile information, we could potentially put caches on there and protect the underlying systems. It's already mentioned around security, so there's traffic management, various traffic management functionalities that are available within API management, that like spike arrests and putting quotas on users. So you could suggest on individual users they have a maximum quota of usage that they can do. Auditing and logging, and against API usage as well, and of course analytics on how it's being used, how much we need to use it. And the key here, and the reason why I mention API management so much, is that for us, being able to put that API management layer in place, because you benefit the ecosystem in that it lowers that barrier to entry, and it puts that consistent monitoring, traffic management, security, authentication, and access control in place. And there are many tools and options out there. Examples of enterprise API management solutions are such as Google Apigee, Microsoft Azure. The beta dev portal is backed by Azure API management. However, there are many other options available as well of varying maturity. And one of the considerations we need to, when we're looking at the tool, is what's a right tool and what's the right approach for NHS Wales and for the NDR. And one of the things we've been focusing on as a team lately, more recently, is looking at some of the top API management solutions on the market and how they would work and fit in with our current processes and infrastructure, whether they're fit for purpose, so that we could make a recommendation on what we could take in. And all of that would support a connected experience, where we'd look at, an application developer or a system supplier or a health board being able to come to the developer portal, see API documentation, be able to look at and understand how they can put a service request in, what kind of processes they'd need to go through, what they could expect, and the security around the APIs that we expose as well, be that production APIs that we could potentially put out there, and sandbox APIs, and of course as well how we can provide enhanced security around those APIs via the API management tool, using NHS Staff ID, using OAuth, using Active Directory and whatnot as well. And API management supports opening up the architecture, improves the way data is used. It helps us give those common interface and those technical standards when exposing APIs, and it's a key driver of a key enabler for the NDR project as well, which we're obviously a part of as well. So the strategic direction for the NWIS part of the ecosystem is, working with the NDR wider program to help open up the architecture, to progress production API management within NHS Wales, to create one portal for NHS Wales to over time hopefully roll out to wider organisations, health boards of social care in Wales, and a linked up process to paths of production as well, where we'd hopefully be able to, speed up and improve how people can integrate. And of course, a key thing is working with the Life Sciences Hub on developer engagement and how we can engage with users, how we can engage with developers, how we can improve the portal, and how we can put out information that people actually want and need. So I've probably scanned through that quite quickly. Please, one of the slides we put up here is please do contact us with any queries, suggestions, or ideas about how we could work with you with the ecosystem and the developer portal. That's obviously Helen's email, my own there as well. And yeah, I've probably gone through that a bit too quickly, but that's where we could go to possibly Q&A or have a discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I usually, when I talk about the ecosystem, I usually end with, how can we help? I think one of the difficulties of this format is we don't know who's here or from where, but basically the question is, how can we help you, what you're trying to do, or how can we inform it, or do you just want to talk, or have you got any questions, or have we just battered you with slides?
Very colourful slides.
Very colourful slides. No, I think that was that was really helpful, actually, on both levels, and I think from my kind of professional experience of people trying to do this kind of thing, needing the two aspects of it, so people actually engaging with the business and breaking down all those barriers which people don't really even imagine are there or realize are there, but they are very real on the one hand, and at the second side, having that kind of deep technical understanding, so that when people do actually get there and you want to focus on a problem, you've got the technology and the ability to describe and talk about and understand, so that people can understand how to use it and make that available. Those two things, in my experience, are really useful, and it's comforting to see this, in that sense, this kind of joint presentation. That there's a recognition that you need both bits to solve the problem properly. We've got one written question so far, which was somebody had asked about the offers which you'd had of help, and wondered if you could just talk through the 8 that you took up and the sort of characteristics on what they were like and why you took them up.
So the offers that were most explored were basically people and laptops. So one of the offers was prioritizing laptops ordered by the health service, because when in March and April everybody started working from home, Lenovo, Dell, everybody, just you could not get a computer for love nor money. So actually that was an offer where the suppliers said, what are your orders? We'll put them to the front of the queue, and actually went out to companies and asked them to give back computers so that they could be freed up for the NHS. So that was really important, and actually we were able to secure some funding from Intel, and I don't know whether it actually happened because it got a bit delayed, to provide some laptops for people who were carers, who were digitally excluded, in order to be able to access online services at this time. So there was the thing about laptops, and the other thing was around people and around cybersecurity, which was also people. Because a lot of the offers of support we had were, oh, I've got this product, this platform, this piece of software that will do all these things. And the feedback we had from the NHS, who were busy setting up field hospitals, who were having to move their entire workforce, administrative workforce, to working from home, is no, we haven't got any time to do any development. We haven't got any time to do any integration. It, you know, even if you say it's plug and play, it isn't. But we need people to set up laptops, and it really was that simple. And I don't think anybody realised that actually that was the biggest IT need, was how am I going to set up, you know, the sort of the field hospital in the Principality Stadium or in base studios, you know, and sort out VPN tokens were one of the biggest barriers to people working from home. And you think, oh well, you know, it's the NHS. They don't invest and have, you know, stacks of VPN tokens in a cupboard somewhere. And so it was those real basics that were the real challenge. And then and I think also particularly around cybersecurity, there was a lot of some offers of support taken up, because that freed up people to go and do laptops. You know, and it really was that, you know, when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. But actually, that was the biggest challenge.
Okay, no, that's very helpful. Thank you. Could I ask you just to give some examples of sort of solutions people have built so far using the APIs and so on? Is there anything we would have? Are they the kind of things which we as patients might have experienced or benefited from, or not?
With regards to fight, no, we're have production fire APIs. Unfortunately, we have worked with a company around bringing in doing a fire example of NPEX, so we called it WPEX, to bring in pathology information. And what we're doing at the moment is we're building up. We're looking to set and get approved data standards around around resources in fire, so that what we can do then is we can look to go to production with, say, reference data APIs and whatnot in support of the NDR and the wider NDR program in the near future.
We did do some work in 2019 and 2020 with a couple of companies who have software which is used by health boards in Wales, and we were trying to understand if we could develop an API that would allow them to deposit information within the NHS sort of digital architecture. But you know, we weren't able to develop a thing and make it happen. It was more about proof of concept and understanding how it would happen and what the barriers and challenges were. And I think that's very much the stage we've been in. You know, it's been a real journey. We thought, and you know, the people who envisaged the ecosystem thought, we'll do things, we'll write APIs and people will use them, and that will be easy and fine. And actually the last 3 years show that it's really not easy and it's really not fine. So we've had to change direction to more of a, let's test this, let's try it, let's learn, you know, what those barriers are. So we're usually more around proof of concept and pathways than actually being able to deliver things, which I think has surprised everyone, which it shouldn't have.
No, I think no, I can understand that. But I think it. Is there some reason that you think puts people off? Are people worried about kind of health service applications because of ethical or data security issues? Something that they think it's not an area for them, or because to some extent you know, you would have you could have thought you put some programmers in a pub and they come up with a dozen ideas for, you know, ways of using health data without, you know, without any trouble at all. So it's surprising if in the sense that there, you know, there aren't people making more of it maybe than
I think that the concerns around patient data, use of data, information governance, patient safety are even more expressly held within the NHS than they are, you know, when it comes to companies. And you know, I said that we are very data rich, but actually we're quite analysis and information poor. So there's all sorts of barriers. But you know, when you look at the news stories about Google DeepMind and you know the way that data has been not even sold, handed over. In other parts of the health service in the UK, you can understand why it's a very cautious approach about how data is accessed and used in the health service. I don't know if you want to comment, Eugene.
Yeah, I think as well as that, it's kind of because we're quite closely tied with the NDR. It's about building up that picture so that it supports, so that it's doing this work now in preparation, so that when we can get all of this stuff into production, that we should hopefully be able to get it into production reasonably quickly.
Okay. And one of the things you did mention, Eugene, was technical debt, and that I think it's a challenge again. I would say in my experience that you end up with versions of things that you have to support if you're not careful, or the stuff you did early is a break on stuff you want to do later because you've got to continue supporting it. And yeah, I wondered whether you could comment a little bit more on that, and have you come up with any answers to that, or
we're looking for example with API management, you can obviously version your APIs as well, and what we're looking at the moment is as part of the recommendations of a report we're writing right now is how we can improve that flow of APIs as well. So for example, consistency in continuous integration, continuous deployment, consistency in approach across teams, and having maybe a central center of excellence API management team that could then look at standards and this is quite a common thing. We see it already in NHS Digital, and it's quite a common thing when you see it, that gets recommended by API management suppliers, having that kind of center of excellence, they're kind of gatekeepers for standards, and improve that process in that you might still have your API team that owns the APIs, runs the APIs, but having a central team that then helps with the process of having versioning standards and good standards when it comes to exposing the APIs.
Yeah, so my experience has been that you have to tell people, we'll support the current version and the one before, but that's all, and you have to, and it will be at your cost to keep up with the technology as it changes or whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeremy, we're coming towards the end, I think. So I don't know if you want to ask for any last questions. And
we have 2 questions in the pipeline for us at the moment, so let's deal with those. If any more sort of turn up whilst we're dealing with those, then we can squeeze those in as well. First question up then is, why in 2021 can staff in one health board not easily get information on the same patient from another health board? Slide 23, I lost track of the slides, but slide 23 looked at a structure but still appeared to be in health board silos.
Slide 23.
If your consultant says there's a specialism in another health board which you need to go see, you can go and see another health board, talk to the consultant, have your tests done, but your original consultant back home doesn't get to see the answers in any sort of quick time.
Well, I guess because there's obviously the Welsh Clinical Portal, and I mean there's multiple programs happening right now that about having consistent data across Wales. The WNCR program, WCCIS, WCP. So I mean, I think there's very active work in improving that, and that's before we even get onto the NDR, which is a national data resource. It's a central team that is federated out between all the health boards. So there's representatives from every health board on the NDR, and one of the things they're looking at the moment is creating that API management. Sorry, not API management. I said that by mistake. That they would create that layer of APIs to improve data interoperability as well. So I think the comment. I think there probably is. I think that's very much the direction of travel. That's exactly what's trying to be achieved.
And I think that particularly over the last 12 months, there's been a big increase in functionality on the Welsh Clinical Portal, driven by the need to be able to share information quicker and better. And I think that, nothing is ever perfect, but there has been, and I think that people don't realise that actually in England, you don't have the Welsh Clinical Portal. So the Welsh Clinical Portal means that if I have a blood test in Cwmtaf Morgannwg, supposedly, the consultant, if I'm in Swansea Bay, would be able to see that. Now, not every test is covered, you know, it's not fully extensive at the moment, but for example, because of COVID, we were able to, I know that NWIS were able to extend Welsh Clinical Portal so that GPs could see it. And so there has been real progress, probably not as fast as necessarily patients and consultants and clinicians would like. And then that progress is building towards a national data resource. So I think the answer is there are things in place, but there's, you know, it's going to get better over the next few years.
Okay, thank you. And then we've just had the most recent question was one about, are we sending slides out to attendees? What we normally do is pop those on the event web page for the branch, so that goes up on the website. And then the final question is addressed to Helen. You mentioned that a challenge for delivery of the ecosystem has been capacity within the NHS to run a project or a pilot. I was wondering if you could say a bit more about how these deliveries are usually set up. Are the pilot projects solely run by the NHS or collaboratively with Life Science Hub?
So it's a mix of both. So one of the things that we did, understanding the challenges around capacity, is that we've stepped in to provide project management resource. The Digital Solution Funds projects, we've done that. So we are managing the projects in terms of the contract management with the companies, but we're also supporting the health boards with the clinical teams who are taking on the project. We are supporting them in how to run that pilot, how to get through information governance, how to make sure the informatics teams are on board, and so on. And we're actually now at the point where, you know, we've had a health board approach us. A clinician has approached us. He's got funding to test a new technology. He knows what he wants to do, but he doesn't know how to run the project. So he said, can you step in? And we said, yes, we can. We've got some resource. I have somebody in my team. I'm about to advertise another 2 vacancies all around project management, because we understand that that's a gap that's needed. However, there are resources within health boards that are looking at innovation projects. So there's innovation and improvement, regional innovation and improvement centres that some health boards are able to tap into. And sometimes, you know, clinicians are driven and want to do things their own and have found the resources. So it's a mix of all of them. But this is, and I think particularly when the clinicians have to find the resources themselves, that's when an 6-month project becomes 18 months. And so how can we support that happening quicker is very much, you know, when you look at the 4 principles that we're operating to, does it fill a gap? Does it make things easier and faster? Then it's very clearly something we should be taking on. But we can't do that for the entire health service. But what we've also done is share all of our learnings and understanding with the Welsh Government. And when they're looking at digital innovation and projects, saying there's no point giving us loads of money to go and test loads of things if you don't build in some capacity into the health service to be able to do that. So the ARFID tracking project was the greatest example, where the #1 finding from the evaluation was that asking somebody who is already in a full-time job to manage this project on top of their day job meant that you know, the project couldn't proceed as it otherwise, you know, as fast as it could have. And it was a lot to expect of one person who was very passionate about the technology and really keen and wanted to do this. But there is a limit to how much you can fit into a day. So it's, yeah, so I think the answer is it's all of those things, but we need to do more.
Good. Okay, thank you, Helen. Well, that brings us to the ends of the questions from our audience this evening. So a couple of things remain for me to do. One is, having always kind of had an intuitive understanding that digital stuff, doing lots of work with data in the health service must be incredibly complicated. It's kind of nice to have that confirmed, but it's also much more important to see that that's actually being tackled in a way which actually avoids the kind of monolithic solution to a monolithic problem, but is actually boiling cupfuls successfully rather than boiling whole oceans and failing. So that's really great. Thank you very much for giving us this evening's talk. That was kind of really interesting. The quality of the questions we've had, I think, indicates that too. So I'd like to sort of formally thank you both for doing that.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Good, good. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be cheeky. Having just heard your presentation, is just trail another couple of future presentations for everyone. The next presentation we've got coming up, and they're all on the upcoming events page of the South Wales branch website. And I popped a link to that into the answer to one of the questions. So you should have been able to spot that. But on the 11th of March at 7 o'clock in the evening, we've got another webinar. The catchy title that is From Digits to Quantum, the technology behind the clicks. The genesis for this was thinking, 18 months ago, 12 months ago, perhaps a little more recently, that there were a lot of newspaper articles, both in the trade press and in the popular press, saying that Moore's law had come to an end. What on earth were we going to do with computing? Because clearly ever more hungry software was going to gobble up our CPU resources. We were going to run it. The world was going to come to an end. So we've actually got a guy called Chris Meadows, who's a director in one of the local semiconductor companies at a joint effort in Cardiff, to talk to us about that. That's the 11th of March, and then moving a month ahead from that to the 13th of April. We're actually all taking a trip together to California, where we're going to have an introduction to Silicon Valley's Computer History Museum. This came about because one of our committee members, well over a year ago, happened to be spending kind of a few weeks in California, went to the Computer History Museum and made the mistake of telling the committee about it. So we said, that sounds really pretty good. Why don't you organise for them to do a talk for us in these days of Zoom and all this online sort of shenanigans? Then we ought to be able to get them to talk to us whilst they're still sat in California. So it'll be 7 o'clock here, it'll be 11 o'clock in the morning there, and we'll have a talk from California and a guided tour, I believe, of the museum. So those are the two events coming up. We've got more in the pipeline. We'll get those on the website as soon as we've done kind of all the practical behind the scenes stuff for those. And as usual, members are welcome to attend. The public is welcome to attend. You're very welcome to do the digital equivalent of bringing a friend and passing on the details of our events to anybody you think might be interested. So there we are. That's the end of this evening's webinar. Thank you again to our two presenters, Eugene and Helen. Thanks, Ian, for organising all of this. And finally, goodbye from me.
Oh, goodbye from us all.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers. Thanks. Bye for now. Bye.
Thank you.